So Canon have just dropped the brand new R5C. The announcement has been a little underhyped, but I want to tell you why I myself am hyped for this camera, but also why I feel like this camera may be a complete flop. So the Canon R5C is a hybrid beast. It's an extended version of the already beastly Canon R5 and is video first and photos second. And with that, the R5C packs a punch with a full frame sensor, 8K 60 frames per second, 4K 120 frames per second, 45 megapixel pictures at 20 frames per second, long duration recording with cinema raw light for optimum picture quality, dual native ISO, and a flippy tilty LCD screen. Now, I wasn't going to make this video because honestly I just don't have the camera, but I feel this camera deserves a little bit more attention, and for me this is kind of what I was hoping that the R5 was going to be in the first place. And this might actually be the very first Canon hybrid camera, like ever. Yeah, I think so. Canon have always released photography cameras or video cameras, but never enough combined to have the best of both worlds. And by the way, a sub to this channel would be amazing. This is a new channel with new growth, so any support on this channel would be sublime. Anyways, Canon were the king of the video revolution when DSLRs first came out, but I honestly feel like they haven't really ever capitalized on it ever since, especially how Sony have released so many amazing cameras over the years, and Canon's just kind of been pushed to the wayside. They haven't really had any cameras which have been notable properly for a long time, until they obviously came out with the Canon R6, R5, R3. And what I like about the R5C is that it has a 3-way power switch, which allows you to boot the camera up in either photo mode or video mode. And they really have put video first in this camera, but you do get the benefits of the photography capabilities of the R5, which is nice. And at the end of the day, video really is king these days. You still need photography, but video is really becoming more and more important within the world that we live in these days. From social media to commercial work, video is really just taking over everything. Photography is still very important, but video is king. And the biggest difference in this camera compared to the predecessor is the size. This camera really has been extended thanks to the huge fan which they have built into the design of this camera. Now, this is obviously to counteract the overheating of the camera itself, and it really has bulked up this camera. So in regards to the photography mode, this camera is a beefy boy, and that might be a downside when it comes to taking photos, because really, if you are mainly photo orientated, you might as well just stick with the R5, because the R5 does everything what this camera does, but in a smaller, better package in regards to photography. But for video, it really makes everything better. And no IBIS. Now, I'm kind of a fan of this. I was never really a fan of IBIS anyways. It's a nice idea and it does benefit in a lot of ways with stabilization within the camera. But I've seen so many clips of people using IBIS in the R5 where it has this really weird wobbly effect, wobbly shaky effect around the edges of the frame, which you just can't really ignore once you see it. So it really makes the shots weird if you're using IBIS for anything like vlogging or for handheld documentary shots. And the R5C has image stabilization and lens stabilization, and those two combined really help to stabilize the image, and I would say in a better way. But word of warning, I have seen footage from this camera with the lens stabilization off, and it's kind of atrocious. It's really shaky and unstable. So if you want to use this camera as a handheld run and gun documentary kind of camera, then you really need to have these two switched on: image stabilization and lens stabilization. But I haven't used it, so I can't really say whether it's beneficial to have the IBIS in this camera or are not in this camera. But for me personally, I think it's a smart move to take the IBIS out of this camera, because at the end of the day, this is more of a cinema camera, and I think it benefits it in the long run. And this camera has 8K 60 frames per second, which is nice, but it comes with a pretty heavy catch. You can film in 8K 60 frames per second, but your whole control of your lens shuts down. Now that means that you lose things such as the autofocus, which is one of the biggest selling points of the new Canon cameras. Now there is a workaround, which is plugging your camera into the wall to allow the camera to have enough power to power both systems, both the 8K camera and the lens together. But I find this a really bad user experience from Canon. Why would you build a camera which doesn't have enough power to allow you to shoot to the highest potential of the camera itself? It's kind of a weird one. I can't really figure out why they've done this, apart from the glossy, sexy title of having 8K within your camera. And it is a nice option to have, shooting 8K, but really, who really needs to shoot 8K at this moment in time? I honestly don't think the world is set up to have an 8K outsource right now in most of the situations that filmmakers would use the R5C for. Which begs the question, why would you even have this in your camera if the camera can't even cope with it? But overall, the Canon R5C is hopefully a glimmer of hope that they are coming back bigger and stronger against Sony and the other competitive cameras out there. And I guess the R5C is Canon's answer to the Sony FX3. Now, I don't know, because I haven't seen the comparisons between these two cameras yet, but it makes sense. We'll have to see the comparisons of these two cameras together. And we'll have to see if the potential downsides of this camera are the downfall of the camera's release. But what are your thoughts on this one? Does this camera pique your interest? Does it tickle your taste buds? Does it get your creative juices going? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. I love your faces, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.